Hi guys, Shelley Fitzgerald with Sew Shelley Quilts. I want to talk to you today about seam guides and the way they attach to all the feet. There are so many different styles of seam guides for a Bernina and the Bernina feet. So I just thought we'd go there. Let's do this real quick. Here are the three styles of feet that come with the Bernina. This one does not have a crystal at the top. It's a 5.5 millimeter foot straight shank up and down. This one has the straight shank and the crystal. That's a 9 millimeter wide foot. And then this is a D or a dual feed foot. It has the crystal and an arc. And the back of the foot has an opening for the dual feed to go in. Right back here. All three of those styles of feet can have a seam guide. Almost all Bernina feet have these openings, these holes with the screw for the seam guides to attach. So that's why I wanted to get all of these out. So here's a C, a 9 millimeter foot. And a lot of the feet, decorative style, these are just the number ones I pulled out. But it doesn't matter. They all have and use the exact same guides. Okay? So when you get a machine that is 5.5 millimeter, well, a lot of the machines, not just the 5.5 millimeter, you get just a basic seam guide that comes in the box. This one is a right seam guide. Now, if you guys see writing on them, that's my initials, so that when I go to class, I don't lose things. So yours doesn't have writing. But this is a right seam guide, and you would just put it in the hole, loosen the screw, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, adjust the space, and then tighten it down. Then you would do some measuring from the center where your needle is. See, there's a mark on the foot where the center needle would be, to the guide to decide how far apart you wanted your spacing. So that's the first style of guide. So I'm going to make a stitch and show you how that works. All right, so I made a row of stitches, and then let's assume that I measured. I did not, but let's assume that I made a nice measurement of exactly how far I wanted my next row of stitching, and I would have loosened and adjusted so that that would be exactly what I wanted. And so then I would make my next row by putting the guide on the stitching. And my eyes are then watching the guide on the stitching, not watching where the needle is sewing. And by watching the guide on the stitching, I have 2 rows that are evenly spaced. All right? And so I could do it again. I would just cut the thread and start over. I have the securing feature turned on my scissors. That's why it bopped and made a nice knot. So you can see how I would then do it again and again and again to get that spacing. So that's the first kind, and all Berninas come with this. You can, I believe, I do not own, but I believe that you can also purchase this guide for the left, so that you could guide that on the left. Okay, so now let's look at another one. And the reason I never purchased that left guide is I adore and use the seam guide with ruler, or seam guide with scale, it says. Seam guide with scale. These are awesome, and they come 2 in the pack. So you get the left guide and the right guide in the box when you get it. I got these years and years and years and years ago. Like I said, they attach to any of the styles of the feet. So I'm going to put the right guide on. It wouldn't matter. And I will loosen. And when you put it on, this time the post goes in. Oops, I didn't loosen it enough. I'm tightening it. So there we go. I'll put the post in and tighten it down a bit. Put it on the machine. I can see the measurements on the foot. I mean on the seam guide. So I can set this up for spacing by loosening it a bit and lining up whatever I want that measurement to be. Let's say I want 1 inch. So I'll put the 1 lined up with the needle and reach behind and tighten the screw. And now I didn't have to bring in something else to measure with. I know that that is what I want. If I wanted 1/2 inch, I could bring it over and line it up with that 1/2 inch. So these are, to me, so valuable. I love them. I love them. Your Bernina dealer has them. They're just an accessory. And so then I can stitch exactly 1/2 inch. I have to tell the machine what I have on. This machine has presser foot recognition. So there we go. So those are the seam guides with ruler. And any Bernina machine and all Bernina feet can use those guides if they can receive the guide. Like I said, almost all, not all, but almost all can use a guide. And these are great because you get the left and the right in the box. So now let's look at the next kind of guide. And when you get a Bernina 880, which is what I have, you have a different kind of seam guide in the box for that. And it is a bar with a flat back and 2 guides. Okay, so the way these guides work, the one that is shorter, you might want to take notes here. The one that is shorter and has the split is intended to ride at the edge of the fabric, not on top. And so then the one that is longer and flat and right here is solid, that is intended to ride on top of the fabric. And you would choose to measure from the left or the right when you use it. Use those edges. And this is the style that came in the 830, and it's also the style that comes in the 880. Okay, so let me show you how that works. You put the bar either on the left or the right. Let's put it on the left this time. So I will insert the round end of this bar in, loosen the screw, and let it go through both holes. You only need 1 screw, but there's 2 holes, and it doesn't matter which side the screw is in. And then this flat on the back is for the guide. So because we're sewing on top of the fabric, we'll use the one that's on the top. And then now I can put this on the machine and measure by the screw on the back of this. I'll loosen this screw, move it to where I want it. Engage my dual feed before I stitch. And then I would decide what I wanted to visually look at when I was using this guide. So let's just say I'm going to make my seam line and measure from the inside to the needle. And that's what these guides are for. And you can make them right on top, on bottom. I've got to change my foot again for the presser foot recognition. So here we go. So now I'm watching the inside of that foot on the previous line of stitching to use as my guide. Like I said, this particular one also that's shorter in length here to here. It's a little deeper here to here. And you can recognize because it's got the split bar. You would put it on the same, but this is intended to ride on the edge of fabric. This is intended to ride on top of fabric. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3 styles. There is more. There is always more. So I'm going to take this off. And when you buy a 1/4 inch piecing foot that is a 97 or the 97D, I have the D right here, you get a guide in the box that screws to the bed of the machine. And this seam guide, oops, let me get my picture back out here. This seam guide can be adjusted. Let me put my foot on. I need to tell the machine I'm using a 97. I will engage the dual feed. Now, you get this seam guide and the screwdriver and the screw. So I'm going to put the screw through here and into this first hole. Right here. And I'll put it in kind of loosely for a second. I'll use the screwdriver. This isn't the same one as for your needle. This is a screwdriver just for this screw. And I can put the presser foot down now. And if I want to use that for my 1/4 inch, then I would scoot it over and then put it down against the edge of the foot. And I would have a nice seam guide for my 1/4 inch. But I also, this one could be used for your 1/2 inch. Maybe if you were doing garments and you wanted to put this on, you could bring it back out here to the 5/8 inch and use this seam guide for different sizes. But that's going to be on the edge of the fabric, not on the top. So that's not used for quilting on the top like we did. That would be used for piecing and for sewing with the fabric buttered up to it. So if I were going to want to sew something with this seam allowance, then I would be using this with the raw edge of the fabric buttered up to that to create that seam allowance, not for quilting on the surface. Okay, so that's a different kind of a seam guide, but it's really handy. Let's see what else I got for you. There's more. There are more. There are more. Okay, so here, there's another video I have all about the walking foot. But just for reference, when you get your walking foot, it comes with both a left and a right seam guide in the box. And in order to put those on, you have this seam guide attachment. So I would put this at the top, and then I would loosen that screw, lefty-loosey, I always have to talk to myself, until those holes line up. Then I can insert the left or the right. This would be the right seam guide I'm putting in. And it's gone through the attachment and the foot. And then I would tighten that down after, and then measure from the needle out. Let me remove this foot. Tell the machine I have on the number 50. That's the walking foot. and then I can put the walking foot in place. Oops, it goes on easier than that, but not with a camera between me and the foot. So there you go. And I have another video on using the walking foot, so you can see exactly how to put that on easily. But once again, this guide, you would just make a measurement from the needle to the width of the seam you wanted, and then you would drive with the guide on the previous line of stitching. Okay, so let's see. I think there is one more I'll show you. Just a minute. Okay, and that is this one that slides onto the table. So let's see. Can you see the edge right here? I'm going to hold this button right here. And when I push in on that, I can just push that up on the edge of the table and it clamped and it's locked in. And then I can depress that and move along and measure. Now the cool thing about this is it's got little holes right here. Let's see if I can turn this to see. So right in here, I can see the measurement of the inside of that line. So if I wanted to put that exactly at a certain measurement, I use the lines on the table. And then for hemming pants, hems, curtains, all sorts of stuff, I have this nice long seam guide. You also could use this. I'm going to slide. I have that same hole on the left side, so I can use this to the left also. And so many people don't know what this wonderful seam guide is, but it's great and it works lovely. And then you use these measurements down here on the table to decide how that works. And then to get it off, you just depress the button and pull back, and it's off. Okay. Now, some tables or machines don't come with this, but it's an option to purchase. So if for some reason this would be really helpful to you, then ask your dealer if your model can have that as an added accessory. So the table seam guide also is so excellent because it comes way out to the side. So there I've got it measured at 9 inches. So if I wanted to sew straight down the center of something at 9 inches, I've got a nice straight edge right here that I can measure. It's awesome. And then also it goes, like I said, to the left. So you could make a big area, I think out to about, almost 5.5 inches to the left. So you've got that straight guide, 5.5 inches from the needle. So a lot of people have these, have no idea what these are, and are not using them, but they can be excellent. They can sew close and they can sew far away. So the last kind of seam guide I would direct you to notice would be the stitch plate itself, where there are etched lines. On the Bernina, they're etched so they won't wear off or rub off. They're on the right and on the left. This happens to be a 9mm machine, so there's a 1/4 inch in front of the feed dog and all the way through the feed dog. So I would put my fabric right here, and then that would be my 1/4 inch from the needle to the edge, 3/8, 1/2. You just come on out and use the edge of the fabric on the lines to determine your seam width. These stitch plates come off so easily just by pushing the back right corner on that round area to change to a straight stitch plate, or a 5mm plate if you have a 9mm machine and plate on, and then you can clean and do what you need to in here and then put it back on. But these are the most used seam guide would be the stitch plate and even the edge of the foot in conjunction with the stitch plate, so that between the two of those together, you've got a really nice guide. So without an external guide, the stitch plate is a wonderful seam guide in itself. So there's a lot of seam guides, a lot of information that we went over. Let's add this one also. So we have the basic seam guide. We had the seam guide with ruler. We have the 8 series seam guides. We've got the walking foot with seam guides. We have the edge seam guide that comes in with the 97s. And I think that's an accessory that could be purchased all by itself also. And then we have the table, the slide-on table seam guide. Oh, and the last thing, you know, you have a drawer full of these little screws that look like this. Those are just coming off of the back of the feet, and they're all interchangeable. So if you've got some of those extra screws, that's where they came from. All right, this is Shelly with Sew Shelly Quilts. Bye for now.